Chris Duffin at the Kabuki Strength Lab, sitting down with Leroy, the Machine Walker. So we've had some pretty good conversations over the last couple days, and one of the topics that's come up a few times was risk versus reward, and that impact on longevity as a lifter. And I think that's a pretty important topic. You know, like we're both been in the game for a while, both have some long-term plans in the sport. And what does that mean to you, risk versus reward?
That's a good question. To me, risk. I think you got to break it into to simplify it down, break it into two parts. I think as a competitive lifter, you have your off season and you have your in season, meaning whether you're on an 8 or a 10 or a 12-week training cycle. The risk reward to me is something. A great example is heavy dumbbell work. When I was younger, I did a ton of it. It was great for developing explosiveness, for tricep work. And as I transitioned and got older, it was something I was, started to be a little bit harder on the joints. But also as you get stronger, you have to increase your weight. You have to, increase your volume. And then for me, it just becomes an evaluation, risk reward and the movement. Is what I'm doing going to be conducive to a bigger bench?
Yeah.
Is it going to be conducive to making me stronger? And for the most part, the answer is yes. But when it comes down to a lot of care and preventative care, a lot of your training cycle, to me, is can you get through 8 to 12 weeks healthy? Are you building and getting better each week? And you see a lot of lifters, they do stuff that's unorthodox or stuff that's out of their element or stuff that's not necessarily constructive to the groove they're trying to build, whether it's a squat or a deadlift or in my case a bench. And so with that being said, it comes down to I look at the movement and I tell myself, is this a movement where if I slip with, say for example, 200-pound dumbbells and I risk, very badly injuring and tearing a pec or, hurting my front delt, is the reward worth it? Yeah. To just say or have on film that, I did 200-pound dumbbells? Or are there movements that I can duplicate, maybe it's a machine or maybe it's other type of assistant work, and get the same strength movement out of it, but cut down drastically on the amount of risk or the amount of injury that I'm exposing myself to.
And sometimes that, because I get this question a lot too, people are like, why don't you do such and such movement? Doesn't it have such a huge training effect on glutes or hams or whatever? I'm like, yes, it does. But that injury risk just way outweighs it. And I would much rather substitute something else that maybe isn't quite as effective, or maybe I've got to take something and be inventive with it and change it to something else to get the effect that I want. But you can also play around with the frequency, the volume, like all these other things, right? If it's a movement that maybe doesn't have quite the level of reward, but the risk is way down and you can up the frequency, up the weights, change the movement. There's ways of getting around it, right?
Exactly. And something I was able to experience, and I think a lot of lifters, tend to shy away from, because especially as we get older, we become, set in our ways. Especially if you have a little bit of success, you get set in your ways. Or if you happen to be ambitious and successful when you're young, sometimes it's your Achilles heel because you don't want to come out of that. Yeah. You want to do the same things that worked for you in your 20s, and you want to keep duplicating that, not knowing that you are putting yourself at risk. Because when you're young, you're vibrant. You're able to bounce back, depending on your diet or how often you're doing the movement. But something that, I've been apprehensive about trying different stuff. People ask me, I've never done particularly a lot of board or a lot of chain work. It's something, with bench blocks I've started to implement a little bit. But something I had, the luxury of experiencing during this training cycle, the last couple of days is the Duffin bar. And I wasn't apprehensive. It was just something that took me out of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. But as different. I did it, I saw the movement. And the first thing I noticed, because I'm an incline fanatic, is this is duplicating the same movement as heavy dumbbells. But it's on a bar, and I can control it. And it's not as, the risk is not half as bad as doing heavy incline, because I don't have to have two people help me load up the weight. I don't have to worry about dropping the weight. I can just get in there. I can do the movement. I can feel the benefits right away. And I think anytime you have to be at least willing to try new movements. So maybe say, for example, if you've never done heavy dumbbells, I'm not advocating go out and try it, but if you try it and you find that, hey, this is not putting me at a high risk, then more power to you. You learn something new, you learn a new movement, but you have to give your chance to put yourself in that position to do the evaluation and say, is this going to be beneficial? And I think a lot of lifters, especially older lifters, they don't give themselves that chance. Now, I'm not going to say I'm never going to do band or chain workout. No matter, you just took me through a great chain session, and it's something I said, you know what, I can incorporate this. But I had to be willing to come out of my comfort zone and try something different.
Oh, that's something we all fall prey to. I mean, because especially if you've, like you said, you've been successful, you go, I've been successful doing what I'm doing. Why would I be doing anything different? And the longer you have that success, the less the tendency is. And we all fall prey to this. But at the same time, you still have to evaluate that risk reward too. So how do you try new things? So there's certainly a balance in there and going, the experimentation and learning, and then taking from that, what do I actually incorporate into my training cycle?
Yeah, and I think it's important, and I think something that we all should be able to do is maybe have a couple bites of humble pie and just understand that this sport is constantly evolving. And I'm a firm believer, I don't have to get, whether I can help someone watching this or in the gym, I don't have to get 100% credit. If someone's able to take a little bit of my methodology or my volume training and incorporate that with your kabuki, your movement methods, and maybe a little bit of Brandon Lilly, then more power to you. Because there isn't one righteous path to get there. No. There's many paths, but if the objective is that we all meet on the top of the mountain, then I'm all for it. I'll be the first to give a guy like Brandon Lilly credit for his cube method, because Brandon, I've stole bits and pieces of your cube method. I've stole bits and pieces of your stuff. Now I'm not gonna infringe and say this is mine and go out there and try to mass produce and market it, but I'm gonna take advantage of the bigger theme here, which is not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to fall off the bike 100 times and get it right one time to say, okay, that works. Look at people that have been successful, pay homage to the people who have done it well before you, and take little bits and pieces of that. It's so much easier.
Yeah, and that, well, actually, you brought up my movement approach, right? So my whole movement website, which is going to go live here in a little bit, is bits and pieces of a ton of other. Very little of it. It's very little like just my approach or just my team's approach. It's taken from a ton of different areas, and then over the years we've tested, refined, maybe changed it a little bit. But again, we didn't reinvent the wheel. We took what was out there and what was proven, tested it in our strength powerlifting world, and said, okay, here's the pieces, and this is how it all fits together for us. That could have been a 20-year project or better if we decided to, let's try to invent it all from the beginning, right?
Exactly.
Probably wouldn't have been able to do it even in that time frame.
Exactly.
So that's a pretty pertinent point to make.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily who gets credit or where you found it, as long as you get it right. Like I'm a big guy, I like to eat, and I'll use this analogy. I don't care if I get a recipe from Anthony Bourdain or Martha Stewart. If the end result is my chicken pot pie tastes amazing, and I serve it to you and you like it, that's all that matters. You're not going to sit back and say, where did you get this recipe from? I'm not going to use it, Oh, Paula Deen, I don't like her. She used too much butter. You don't care about that. You're going to take bite after bite, and you're going to like it. Sometimes we just have to sit back and enjoy something that maybe someone else has prepared and understand.
So speaking of food analogies, this plays really well into, incorporating changes, right? Because if you're making that awesome pot pie and you've got this brand new recipe, you're not going to do it the day that the wife's family's over visiting for like Christmas, right? You're going to go with the tried and true. What you've done before, not the, I've got this new idea and this new recipe and let's give it a shot today, right? You're going to pick what's known, and it's exactly that way for like competition, right? I mean, it's like you were giving me yesterday bench press advice, and you didn't take it personal that I wasn't putting that to use right now, because you know that I'm prepping for a meet as you're prepping for a meet, and I'm not going to make dramatic changes to my technique or do anything, a few weeks out, right? And but I'm definitely going to be incorporating that stuff in the next training cycle and putting that to use. What's your thoughts on that?
I think you hit it on the head, spot on. Is you gotta, no matter what happens, no matter what you see, you gotta know what works for you, what got you to where you are, and you gotta know, have some stick to it and stay the course. Of course, all the time there's gonna be some things, some variances, some things that come along your way, and you, as much as you get tempted to try it, I would say stick the course. But but also understand that there's some things that may come along that may be stuff you already do that helps reinforce it. Sometimes when you're having certain doubt. Great example is when you're going for a heavy bench or heavy squat or heavy deadlift. You'll have some people out there that think you need to do a lot of doubles and triples and get close to that 80, 85, 90% percentile of your max. Do a lot of singles, doubles through your whole training cycle or closer you get to the meet. And for a while I went back and forth questioning that method, as I approach and I want to ultimately go for 700, but all my training and everything that's got me through has always been, based on something you talk about, velocity and speed. And then, along the way, a good example, like I was giving you advice, I saw the post Krill did, how he showed a 661 for 4. And he's actually went on record to say that's the heaviest he had in his hand. And it's something that resonated with me, not to change it up and try to do 661 because that's an ungodly amount of weight, but it reinforced that when I look back at my training cycles, some of the biggest weights I hit, I didn't come anywhere close to 1 rep maxing. Matter of fact, when I went and missed the 705, I think the heaviest weight I had in my hands was 620 for that training cycle. And afterwards, that's when I think I got away from what worked. And what I think some people, they make the mistake of is sometimes when you have failures, you try so hard to overcorrect. And right after the meet, you want to make it right. So I went there, I missed it, and then right away, you need to do CNS and overload training. So I went a whole nother training cycle doing heavy slingshots, doing board presses, doing stuff that was different, but it wasn't the formula that got me to where I got to be in position to almost miss 705. And granted, I always say you learn a lot from your misses, but sometimes you got to also embrace what got you to the point to make that miss and not overcorrect or overanalyze or be too hard on yourself. You need to be able to take positive criticism and look in the mirror and say,
Yep.
I need to fix this, I need to change this. If I want better results, I got to put in better training, a little bit better methodology. But you don't need to blow up everything and just change your whole, your whole method.
Let's start from scratch and toss everything.
No, I don't think you can abandon that.
No, I think it's constantly finding that direction. It's imagine there's I like to think about it this way. There's this herd of cattle, heading down the highway, right? And the way to steer the course is to just find the outliers and get them back in. It's not to chase that whole herd, another direction. The easiest way if you can't manage 1,000 cows, but you can manage this one, that one, kind of keep and steady the course and keep the direction, right? So find those little pieces and continually refine your path, but don't be going to try to steer the 1,000 cows all of a sudden another direction.
Exactly.
Right corner. You're going to have major chaos. Exactly. You don't know what's going to fall apart, but something's going to.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that falls into something I think we're going to touch on maybe in the next segment is what, you got to find a balance of being able to dissect a lift and understand what you need more work on and what you don't, but also what is going to help you get stronger without taking on necessarily more injury or more pain, but being able to decide this hurts a little bit, but it's a good hurt. Just like we were talking about, the Duffalo bar. Sometimes you're going to do stuff that you feel sore in places you haven't felt sore, and it's a good thing, rather than not being able to adapt and change and keep doing stuff that's going to cause you injury because it worked for you X amount of years ago.
I think that's a really valid point, is understanding and learning to differentiate the difference between that adaptive stressors
Mm-hmm.
and negative stressors, things that are gonna, wow, that pain is not a good pain. That's pain, not, guess what? A hard workout is gonna cause some pain, but it's an adaptive stress. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna leave you better off in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's other types of pain that's just gonna, if we keep that path, it's gonna lead a
Exactly.
downhill course, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not all the same. And guess what? It's hard work, and hard work doesn't mean that it's going to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to be able to take it and go, yeah, it's. I'm not going to walk away from this workout feeling reinvigorated. That's not the plan for this one, and that's not a bad thing as long as you don't take it too far and it's like, oh, I just beat myself up and I'm hurting myself.
Exactly.
Yeah, really important pieces.
Mm-hmm.
This is you kind of hit on it a little bit here, but you're talking about your 8 to 10, 12-week training cycles. How does that fit into, like, your thoughts on an annual process? Like, with all of myself, I really think about my training on an annual cycle, and we like to provide that same picture to our clientele as well, that it's not just this constantly, what is my goals for 1 month from now? They're really important, but it's, you're constantly, you see some lifters that they're constantly competing like every couple months, or and that's all the focus is how do I get that up for the next meet? How do I improve my results from this meet to the meet I've got next month? How do you look at that?
I think there's, it's a great question. I think there's a couple different ways to tackle it. Obviously, there's a couple important factors that I think you have to take in consideration. One, your age. How fast can you recover? How many meets do you look to do in a year? And as you get older, or as you become better, or if you're, genetically built, or if you have the work ethic to become on, one of the upper echelon or one of the elite lifters, what's your goal? What do you want your legacy to be? Because I think it carries a lot of weight. So if you're someone who's younger, trying to establish a name for yourself, I think you can maybe look at stuff on a meet, or maybe a 2-meet kind of cycle, or maybe 5 or 6 in a year, versus I think if you're older and you're more established, and there's certain, like I know for you, and I'm not going to say it, but you have a very, very, very impressive number that you're chasing. And I know right off the top of my head, looking at that number, if you were to try to do that number when you were younger, you might be able to do maybe a couple more frequent meets.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to solidly hit it and to aggressively go after it with a solid game plan, with solid training cycles, I would say maybe 1 or 2 meets a year. And that's what I'm looking at now that I feel I'm starting to become more established, because I have a number in my head, and that number for the longest time has been 700. And I found that if you do a lot of frequent meets, and then I'll just come out and say it, whether you're single ply or raw, whether you're running gear, whether you're not running gear, you need to give your body a certain amount of time to recover, or else it's the old cliche, you're just duplicating the same thing. So how can you duplicate the same thing, not get the results you want, and think if you duplicate it even more times, you're going to have better end results? I think you need to be able to learn from your setbacks. Unless you're going to a meet. And I feel if you go to a meet and you hit all 3 lifts, either do 2 things. Either you had a great training cycle, or your expectations were too low. And I think that's more the case, the latter, where a lot of people go into meets, they have mediocre training cycles, and then they want to lower their standard, rather than just having a high standard and say, you know what, I'm going to take a couple meets off because I want to hit that number. Because to me, that's where I want to be. And I think a lot of people, they're more into the participation award. They're more into going to the meets uncontested, lifting against 1 or 2 people in their class, getting a trophy, being able to maybe post about it, having, mom or dad or the girlfriend or husband or wife, congratulate them. And it feels good, and that's important to have support. But at the end of the day, you got to do it for yourself.
Absolutely.
And if you're not doing it for yourself, I'm a firm believer maybe you're not doing it for the right reasons. And with that being said, you just, it all comes down to what kind of legacy, what are you trying to build, you know?
And if you're doing it for yourself, for me, that's where it becomes important that year over year you're getting better. Not
Yes.
that this month I was up, that next month I'm down, and it's this, I think you're limiting your long-term perspective if you're not looking at it on that annualized basis. Your year over year improvements. I'm moving from a 600 bench to a 650 to a 675 to a 700 to, right?
Yeah.
That you've got to look at that
Yeah.
and have a plan for that.
Yeah, and that's something I had to do with myself. I've had, some little issues, some bumps and bruises, some scrapes. They're all part of the sport, and I've really had to reevaluate and change my focus, not so much on the number, but continually getting better. Because to me, at the end of the day, a fail is a fail. But say, for example, something we went through last night. If you can look back at your training cycle and just say, for example, 3 weeks. If you have 3 weeks in a row, middle of your cycle, you're going for something heavy. There's a difference between last night a fail at 705 in a slingshot versus 3 weeks ago a fail when it barely got off my chest and everybody has to pull it off me, to where you get to the point where you're almost locking it out. Granted, I learned from each fail, but there's different levels of fail.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's something you got to be able to give yourself that type of room to say failure is okay. Did I fail at 680? No. Why? Because I said going into it, I said, you know what? This is my second workout. I'm tired. I'm not making an excuse. But fuck it. If I'm going to fail, I want to fail big. Let's throw 725 on there. Let's see what happens. Because I know I'm going to learn more from that. And with the right kind of coaching and the right kind of support, it's going to make you a better lifter. And it's just part of the territory. But a lot of people don't know how to fail their way to success. And that's part of what the sport is about, is you only grow from what pushes you. If you keep pushing against the wall and it doesn't push back, there's no resistance. You're not going to grow. You're going to become stagnant. If you become stagnant, you're going to die. It's like, why am I doing this? And that's the thing. You got to be able to challenge yourself, because regardless of how great your coaching, how great your mentors, how great your team, how great your supplement company is, how great your sponsors are, at the end of the day, you can be led to water, but it's you on the platform. It comes down to how bad do you want this? Because the iron is not going to lie to you. The iron is not going to miraculously get lighter. It's going to say, if it says 650, if it says 700, if you're squatting 900 pounds, it's not going to say, fuck, I'm scared of Chris Duffin. He's a badass. Let me change it to an 850-pound bar. No, that bar wants to change, if anything, to 950 and say, you know what, bring it. And that's the mentality you have to have. You have to be able to just bring it and know that's what it's all about. That's what makes this sport great, is you can have all the fluff, all the pats on the back. People can tell you how great you are, and it does not matter till you get out there and you either get 3 white lights or 2 white lights and a red, or you either make it or you don't.
Yep.
And if you don't make it, do you have the guts to give it a couple months and do it again?
That is the beauty of the sport, is it not?
It certainly is.
Well, I think that's a good point to wrap up this session. So I appreciate the conversation. I'm sure everybody else is as well. So, all right. Thanks, Leroy.
All right.
If you want to maximize your strength and the longevity of your athletic career, or just support the production of further content, click on this video to the link to our store to check out our full line of products.